Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
Good Monday evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Learn Photography with Duck. As always, I am your host, Duck, and today is Lightroom edition. And we got some good stuff for you. Before we get started, I just want to make a quick little note that I'm going to be doing a presentation through CTPPA. It's called From Brag to Drag. And how to take your photos to the next level, which basically I just kind of like combined a bunch of the lessons that I've been teaching you here about how to, examine an image and annotate it so that you can further develop it and enhance it through editing. Things like, and of course, my three big things for editing is texture, color, and luminosity. So if you're interested in that, you need to go to ctppa.com. There is a charge because unfortunately, it's not my event. They're in control of that. But it's coming up on May 20th at 8 p.m. It is a Zoom event. So anyway, that's coming up. Bill has something that he wants to share with us. So let's
Yes,
go ahead
Duck,
and
I'm sorry I said test while
that's
you were
okay. We'll
speaking. When you press test, it's not supposed to go out into the Zoom call. I don't know why that happened.
I
It's
who
it's
knows?
a it's one of those. Let
Yeah,
me share the screen, and I will share my photo. There we are. Do you see my screen?
I do. Let me go ahead and move that over to here. So,
There we are. Okay, as you know, I run the camera club at the Plainville Senior Center,
mm-hmm.
and we're having photography exhibits with opening receptions in April. It will be at the Plainville Public Library April 1st, April 19th, with an opening reception Wednesday, April 3rd. That's a month from yesterday at 4 p.m. And then we take the exhibit to the Plainville Senior Center for April 23rd to May 3rd, and we'll have an opening reception there Wednesday, April 24th at 10:30. And we'll have refreshments. Everybody's invited.
Cool. And these are images that were taken by the seniors.
Yes, and me,
Cool. Cool.
including me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let me just write that real quick. Uh,
I'll also send this JPEG to you.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
All right. Yeah. So, all right. Then I won't bother writing notes. Just, yeah, send that to me. Wednesday, April 3rd, 4 p.m. Cool.
right.
Uh,
Or Wednesday, April 24th at 10:30. The April 3rd is at the library. The
at the
April
library.
24th is at the senior center.
Now, is it the same images? They're just getting transferred from one location to the other
Yes,
kind of thing? Okay.
yes.
Cool.
So,
Cool.
so on Saturday, the 20th, we'll be taking down and we'll be putting up the following Monday and then doing
Right.
the reception on the 24th.
Okay.
The other thing
Awesome.
that's going on, North Haven Camera Club, fortunately I can't go because I have an obligation with this group, on April 20th at the high school, at the middle school. I take that back. At the middle school is Earth Day, and different people, different environmental organizations will have their will have their displays out, and so will North Haven Camera Club, and we'll also show a video of all of the winning photos from last year.
Oh, cool. Nice.
Hold on 1 second. Let me just get the exact place. I thought it was. Uh, April 20th, and it just says he's. I think I will confirm this at some point later on. It will either be the high school or the middle school, and it will North Haven Camera Club will be there.
Okay. Well, if you want, send me the event info on Facebook, and I'll share it through
Great.
Facebook. Okay.
I'll send this one to you on through Facebook Messenger, and you can put it on the
Okay.
site, or I could put it on the site. Whatever.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Cool.
Good.
All right.
Good,
Awesome.
thanks.
Thanks for sharing that info. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So hopefully everybody's had a good couple of weeks so far. We're into the new month. Warm weather's here. Not like we really lost a lot of, warm weather. It's been such a weird winter, It's like I at the beginning of winter, I dragged my snowblower out of the shed, brought it into the garage so that it's right there, in preparation of having to snow blow the driveway. And I have not needed to use it this year. It's been ridiculously warm. Even those few days that we had snow, the snow was so light. I just 5 minutes, I had the thing shoveled. So, but it looks like it's going to be an early spring. One of the things I was discussing kind of like off air before we came on is that what I want to do this warm weather, spring, summer, and fall, is get out and do a little bit more shooting than I did last year. More for having images that I can use for these classes, but also just because it's a lot of fun to get out and shoot in groups. One of the things that I definitely want to do this spring, especially once the leaves start coming out on the trees, and something that I haven't done in a while, is the multiplicity photo shoot, where we kind of get together. We get together in groups and we shoot multiple images of ourselves, and then we combine it in post so that we have a multi-image self-portrait kind of thing. So,
Are you going out shooting anytime this week or next week, Chuck?
Unfortunately, my work schedule just got fairly busy. I had 2 jobs come in within the past couple of days. So,
Okay, this is for anybody else who's not busy. A friend of mine posted a video of the waterfall at Wadsworth Fall yesterday.
oh yeah,
And
yeah.
it is heavy, and we're going to get more rain. So this is a good time to go get waterfall pictures.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Actually, if you're interested in waterfall, the best thing is just definitely keep an eye on the weather. The best time is directly after a good rainfall, because the water just flows. So, absolutely. Who do we got? Brian. Brian's in the house. Awesome. Welcome, Brian. All right. So today, what I have for you guys is just a couple of things. What I wanted to do was do a demonstration on how to add atmospheric fog to your image. In the past, actually, let me go ahead and bring this up. So in the past, we have seen, where we've added. Let me get the before. Oh, wait a minute. That's the TIFF file, the Photoshop file. Do I have? No, I don't have it. Do I? Yeah, I don't think I have the before. Yeah, okay. So here, something like this. Oops. All right, so this, and then the before image, where we take a rather plain, boring image, that by itself, really shows no interest. We did a session where we kind of brought in and added color and added a little bit of texture. And again, this kind of plays on that, how to take an image from drab to brag just by, editing into that wow factor. So adding color, adding texture, controlling how you manipulate the light to view. Oh, I can talk today. Holy crap. Manipulate the light so that you can direct the viewer's eye to very specific points of your image. Ah, holy smokes, my tongue's not working today. So what I figure I do is, bouncing a little bit off of that, I was going to show how to, add atmospheric fog to an image that is rather drab, but allow that to kind of frame and bring forth a subject so that, it stands out a little bit more. So I have, let's see, basically just this example. So that's the before and that's the after. All right. So it's a bit overdone just so that you can really see the extent of what can be done. So I'll walk you through the process of creating something like this. Obviously, I went a little heavy on the fog, but we'll redo it and we'll tone it down a little bit. Or something like this, something that already has fog, and what we'll do is we'll just enhance it. Okay. So while I was preparing for this, I actually came across an image that was in my discard pile. And it was in my discard pile because at the time I thought it was terrible photo. All right. And secondly, I had no interest in a particular style of photography, and that's intentional camera movement. But if you recall, the past several months, I've actually been talking about creating intentional camera movement in post-production and utilizing different effects to kind of create that Pet Ventosa feel, which doesn't necessarily use intentional camera movement, but in the combination and the editing of multiple images, it kind of gives you that really surreal, almost intentional camera movement. So anyway, I came across this particular image and I'm like, so at the time, there was a heron at a local park, and it ended up taking off in flight, and I was not prepared for it. All right, so I came across the heron. He was standing in the pond. I was trying to get my camera set up to take photos of it, and it decided to just take off. And in my rush, I captured like 3 or 4 images that are like really, really blurry and out of, just terrible. But then, after the previous lessons that we talked about intentional camera movement, when I saw this again, I now started seeing this image with a different set of eyes. I started looking at this with the eyes of the intentional camera movement mentality of that abstract photography. All right. And like I said, for the most part, for me, this would be a junk, worthless image. And it just so happens that it's an accidental, abstract, intentional camera movement that I just did not identify it at the time. So anyway, what I did is, all right, this is the before image. You can see that the bird just barely stands out. and then I edited it up a little bit. So what I want to do is before we get into the atmosphere, we're gonna do this edit first because it kind of does add a little bit more atmosphere to it. So we'll trampoline off of this one and into the other edits. Okay, sound fair? Okay. So let me go and actually let me go ahead and I'm just going to reset this to the original. Okay. And this is the original image. So you can see that straight out of camera. It has a certain quality to it that is very pictorial. It's definitely hits a lot of the check marks that would be considered an abstract image. You have a very simplified background. You have a very identifiable subject, albeit it's out of focus, but it's not so out of focus that you cannot tell what it is. All right. And that's one of the beauties of having an abstract photo. Okay. So that's why when I saw this again in my rummaging through my library, it made me look at it in a different light simply because it was a topic that we had recently discussed. Now, this is a type of photography I normally do not shoot. So this one just happened to be completely accidental. However, if this is something that you want to experiment with, it's very, very easy to do. All right. And all you have to do is really just control your shutter speed and control your camera movement. In this case, I was grossly at a slow shutter and I was tracking the bird as I was photographing it. Okay. But because it was a seat of my pants image, I didn't properly set my shutter and ISO to capture a what you would consider a proper image, one that's the subject is in adequate sharpness. Okay, so after seeing this, I'm like, the one thing that really appealed to me about this particular image, well, actually there were a couple things. One was the texture of the background. It just has a very calming feel to it. I don't want to say welcoming because it's it's one of those things where you either like abstracts or you don't. You either like the photo or you don't, or this style of photo. All right. And for me, I normally don't like this type of photo. But again, looking at it with a different set of eyeballs, I love the abstract part of the background. And to be honest, if I had a printed background with just that upper part, so if we were to cut this and just do a background of that upper part, oh my God, that'd be a great backdrop, So anyway, then I started looking at it a little bit and say, okay, how can we make this particular image a little bit better? All right. So again, going through the checklist of approaching it with, okay, what do I not like about this? Or what do I identify as being wrong with this image? Here's the few things that I identified. Okay. So for one, one of the things that I usually tell people is if you kind of like step back away from your image and you squint your eyes ever so slightly to blur out any detail, that will let you know whether you have a strong subject or a weak subject within your composition. If when you squint, your subject disappears, that means you have to do something to bring that subject forward. All right. In this particular case, I don't have to squint. Excuse me. I don't have to squint because it's already very soft. All right. But if I kind of sit back and look at it, we can immediately identify one particular problem, and that is that there is this area of the background, all right, and if I recall correctly, this was the sun glinting off the surface of the water. All right, this was in a little lake across the river from where I am, and the fore part of the lake was in the shadow of trees, and then the further part away from me, the water was in full sun. So what we're seeing is an overexposure on the water. All right, and if you notice, we have a conjunction of the bird right at that line of brightness. So the bright part, let me clear that, the bright part of the bird and the bright part of the water kind of melded together. Right? So that becomes a problem where it's very difficult to now separate the subject from the background simply because there's that having a mental block, a tangent. Thank you. We have that tangent going on there. Okay. The only saving grace is the lower part or the outer edge of the bird's wings are darker than the body, so we can that helps us define a little bit that this is a bird. All right, and of course we have the neck of the bird, which is a little bit darker than everything else, so we have something we can play with. All right, so what does that mean? Well, for one, we need to separate the bird from the background. Okay, and we can do this in one or more of three ways. We can manipulate the exposure, we can manipulate the color, or we can manipulate the texture. And typically what you'll find is you'll be doing all three to one extent or the other. Okay, so if we really look at this, we can see that, okay, in order to separate the bird from the background, we either need to darken that white band of highlight behind it and brighten the feathers of the bird, or vice versa. Okay. The other thing I noticed is that the majority of the background are very warm tones. They're oranges and yellows and browns, whereas the bird is cool tones. We have, the blue heron is not really blue. It's gray. So we have cool grays and cool whites on the bird. So right off the bat, we have the ability to really start pushing that, where we can warm up the background and cool off the bird in order to create a little bit more, that contrast between warm and cold. Okay. And finally, we have texture. All right. And so you might think to yourself, okay, well, in this particular image, there's intentional camera blur. what's the texture and blur? It's very soft, okay? But if we look at the texture, actually, let me see if I can zoom in on the bird. Okay. If we look at the texture of the bird, even though there is a lot of blur going on, there is these little smaller areas of texture where we can see you know, the individual feathers coming down. All right. So that tells us that there's something there that we may be able to manipulate. Okay. All right. So now that we've identified the major problem of, you know, separating the subject from the background, let's go ahead and tackle it. All right. So all of this is going to be done with local adjustments. All right. There really are no global adjustments that are going to move our edit forward to where we want it. Okay. So if, for example, we do anything with texture, if I pump up the texture, you know, for the bird, it's also going to pump up the texture for the background. And it's just going to keep us in the same, with the same problem, just enhance that problem a little bit more. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mask. And because of the irregular shape of the bird, I'm going to go ahead and use a brush. Okay. So with the brush selected, I'm just going to click on Show Overlay here. All right, Show Overlay, just so that as I am painting, I can see what I am doing. And I'm going to go ahead and select the bird. Now I'm going to keep my feather really soft, all right, because if we notice the edges, because we're dealing with a very blurry subject, the edges are very soft to begin with, okay? I'm going to reduce my brush size down, and I'm going to brush on the legs of the bird here. Okay. And we're going to do the neck and head of the bird as well. All right, so once I have this kind of sort of selected, we can now start manipulating it. Okay. All right, so I have the bird. What do we want to do? We want to separate it from its background. All right, we have a warm background. So for the bird, we want to really cool it off. All right, so one of the things we can do is we can come right to our color tab. All right, so we're create new mask. All right, actually, let me go ahead and label that bird. Okay. And we're going to come over to our color temperature, and we're just going to bring it down. Okay. Now, remember, as soon as you start applying a effect to your mask, that overlay is going to disappear so you can see what happens. All right. And then when you let go, if you don't want the overlay, so usually once I build a mask, at that point, I don't really need to see it, so I'll go ahead and turn it off. All right. The shortcut key is you can use the letter O to show the overlay or hide the overlay. All right. So that's a little bit too blue. All right. We just need to cool it off just enough to really separate it from the background. So it takes it from a warm gray and just cools it off just a little bit. The other thing we want to do is we want to add a little bit of texture. Okay. Again, realize that we are working with an already blurry image. but we can still add local texture to it to make it stand out a little bit. It's not going to be this phenomenal, very super noticeable. It's very subtle, but it's these little subtleties that kind of just make it a little bit more obvious when we're looking at it in contrast to everything else within the image. Okay. So in order for sharpness to work best, you need to contrast it against blur. All right. So we have a blurry background. We need to increase the sharpness on our foreground or our subject in order to bring attention to that subject. Okay. So a little effect. Okay. And then the other thing we can do is we can see if manipulating any of the exposure tones, all right, so maybe, darkening the shadows a little bit, see if that works. Okay. Bringing the highlights down, yeah, maybe not. Okay. I think what I might do is brighten that background. So rather than darkening the subject too much, I'm going to darken the subject by brightening the background, if that makes sense to you guys. All right. So in essence, we're not physically reducing the brightness of the subject, but in relation to the background, we're going to brighten the background, which makes it appear like their subject is now a little darker. Okay. So I think that's pretty much it for now. Again, one of the nice things about working in Lightroom is everything is non-destructive. We can always revisit it. All right, so there's our bird. I'm going to now, because I've already built this mask, instead of redoing the work, I'm going to utilize this. All right. The way we do that is we go to the where's my... Of course, yeah, there we go. My three little ellipses right next to the mask name. And what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate, okay? Duplicate, all right? But I want to duplicate it and invert the mask, all right? So right here we have a duplicate and invert mask. And what that's going to do is it's going to give me a selection of everything but the bird based on that mask that I just built. So that's a little bit of a time saver. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and double click on that. And I'm just going to label that background. Okay. All right. Once it's duplicated, all right, where's my effects here? When you duplicate a mask like that, it does not carry over any of the settings that you used. So we applied a little bit of color, cooling it off, and we applied a little bit of texture by increasing the texture. It kind of erases that and resets everything to 0. All right, so all that, the effect is gone. All right. So here we go. We're going to go to our background, and we're going to bring the exposure up just a little bit. We're going to go to a color, and we're going to warm it up just a bit. We can go to the tint, and we can manipulate the tint, see if, maybe add a little bit more red to it. Well, that actually I kind of like that. Okay. So now you can see if I turn my masks off, all right, that's before and that's after. All of a sudden we go from where's the bird to here I am. All right. And just two very simple masks. All right. And we can probably call it quits right there if you want. Again, salt and pepper to taste. All right, but I'm going to take it just one little step further. I'm going to create one more mask. This time it's going to be a radial gradient, one of my favorites. And I'm going to place that over the bird, and I'm going to make it fairly large. All right. And I don't want it to affect the bird. I want it to affect everything outside of the bird. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invert the mask. And if we look right up here where it says radial gradient, we have our invert. All right, we just click on that. And now what happens is everything outside of that radial gradient is now selected. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push the exposure up a little bit. So now what happens is we have a more of a high key image than previously by really pushing all those into brightness. Okay. And if we want, we can go ahead and adjust this accordingly. Okay. Maybe just do a little bit of an angle. All right. And I think that's pretty much it. Okay. So let me see. Oh, won't let me do it. Okay, hold on. Before and after. Before and after. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just crop in a little bit. Where do I want to put this bird? I'm not going to go the 3/4 view. I think what I want to do is I want to really push it into the corner here. There we go. There's a bit of a brown spot right there that's kind of bugging me. So I might add another radial and just bring the shadows down. Oh, shadows up. There we go. There we go. Okay. And maybe the blacks a little bit. Bring the saturation up just a touch. There we go. And one more just for that brown spot right above the bird. So right there. Actually, you know what? I'm going to take this one. Since we already have the effect that we need, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it. We can right click, duplicate the radial gradient. I'm going to move it over and just size it accordingly. All right, and place it right over that. There we go. And that kind of takes care of that. Let me just bring this up a little bit more. There we go. Okay. Ba-ba-bum. There we go. So before and after. Before, after. All right. So very simple. Didn't really require a lot of work. Again, it's just the principle of creating contrast. In this case, we created contrast more so with color. All right, warm tones against the the cool tones, and to a little bit of an effect, the texture. All right, we added a little bit of sharpness to the bird just to give it a little bit more separation from that blurry background. Okay, and as far as exposure, we just kind of burnt down or dodged down the dark spots, and voila. Okay. As a matter of fact, we could even, if we wanted to, we can play around with it a little bit more, go to our background and see if maybe we can brighten up the whites, maybe. Oh, not the whites, the highlights. Yeah, there we go. Maybe Yeah, actually, that helps the bird stand out a little bit more. Okay. All right. Any questions on this particular edit? Okay.
I just have one.
Sure.
I see the idea of making the subject stand out over the background. I just get concerned about a critique that's given in competition, and you know how I feel about competition.
Yeah.
The critique in competition is that the eyes always go towards the lightest part of a picture. That's my
Okay.
only concern.
All right. That's that
Other than
is
that, other than that,
okay.
I can see. I don't know why people say that because I
Be,
always
be,
don't go to
because
the lightest
I will explain that.
Okay.
Because they are repeating a mantra without understanding it.
Thank you.
All right. They're repeating something that's been taught to them. They never really went into, okay, why is this true? All right. And then they just kind of repeat it because that's all they know. All right. Either they want to sound smart or they truly believe it without really fully understanding it. But I think you've listened to my Beyond the Rule of Thirds.
Yes.
And one of the things that I say there is that typically, typically, your eye is going to go to the brightest part of the image first. Unless the entire image is already bright and there is a dark spot, then the rule flips. That's
Okay.
why high key and low key work so well, right? Most images we're looking at it in a more of a low key environment. That's the typical format that we notice images in, where the background is darker than the subject, right?
Okay.
So because the subject is brighter, all right, and especially if we can create a little bit more of that contrast so that we really see the brightness, then our eye goes to that bright spot. That is a good 90% of the images. But when we're dealing with a high key image, a high key image is the majority of the image is brighter than 50% gray, with just
Okay.
small parts being under 50% gray, right? And at that point, our eye focuses on the dark spot. So, understanding that, look at this. Let me take myself out. Where am I? Oh, come on, come on, come on. What? I'm not disappearing. All right. Let me go out of the way. Oh, let me go this way. All right. So look at this particular image and tell me, where does your eye go?
To the duck.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Why? Is that the brightest part of the image?
No.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Okay. Why does your eye go there?
Because that's the thing that is standing out to me.
Yes.
That tells me that
Perfect.
you, as the artist, want me to
Perfect.
see the bird.
Why? Because of the contrast that I created between that small section of darkness against all that brightness. All right.
Okay.
So,
Mhm.
so hopefully that explains that for you a little bit better.
Thank you.
Oops. There we
Sometimes I feel I have to unlearn things that some people say.
go. You know, well, you already know my opinions about judging
You want to
competitions.
hear my favorite one? This picture was at I think it's called the Bradford Electric Railroad Yard. It's at Bradford Electric Railroad. It was a railroad track and a barn that said Bradford Electric Railroad. And one of the judges said, I'm not kidding, I would have healed out, photoshopped out the overhead wires at the
Oh.
Bradford Electric Railroad yard.
Yeah. You know, and
That is pretty funny.
it is
funny.
it is funny. Yeah.
It's funny.
You know, yeah. If anything, I probably would have photoshopped more wires in. That really would have really just cinched it. But yeah, yeah. I That's why whenever I judge any competitions, I try to keep it as objective as possible. And sometimes I have people questioning me why I ranked a particular image higher than others, because when they look at it, they would have ranked it lower. And that's because I'm not going by my gut feeling. I'm going by the objective qualities of the image. So anyway, all right. So yeah, so perfect example of how that law, that rule, is just thrown out the window. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Okay.
I have a comment about what you just did.
Oh, what?
An observation, the timeliness of it. Am I on?
Sure.
Yes.
Yep.
No, it's just
Oh, what?
a number of years ago, I have a whole group of photos that I used to take, and they were digitally out of focus and digitally messed up. And I stumbled on that technique kind of by accident when I had my S90 camera, and it was all taking pictures of rock concerts, and I couldn't get backstage. Anyway, I was going to revisit them, and what you did here today gave me a lot of ideas, because the images are similar, but there's some different kind of fuzziness going on, but also
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
multiple stuff, the way it does the thing with the multiple exposure almost.
Oh yes. Yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah. Yeah. The thing with any kind of that, any of that more abstract or experimental type photography, if you want to call it experimental, alternate types of editing, alternate types of photography, is that, well, one, it's very subjective. Not everybody's going to like it. So right there, you just got to kind of go la 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 to all the haters. All right. But the thing is, it allows you to really experiment with different types of techniques if you have the techniques in your belt, in your tool belt. Okay. So, some things will benefit from enhancing certain quote unquote flaws. Okay. By you take the source image. Let's say you only have one image. It's kind of blurry. It's kind of shaky, or whatever the case may be. And then we just take it and we kind of cut it up. Put the subject on a separate layer. Take that background layer and blur it even more, kind of like what we did previously with the image of Alan, where we kind of took that background, we streaked it, and we put Alan back in. All right. Or even the Pep Ventosa, where we took multiple angles and kind of like stacked them and used blend modes. You can use a combination of those two techniques with a single image, where you duplicate the layer, separate the subject from the top layer, all right? And then once you have your isolated background layer, you make a couple of copies of that, and you apply different levels of blur or different levels of motion blur, all right, and utilize some different blend techniques to see if you can create something a little bit more abstract or interesting, and then bring the subject back in, blend the edges a little bit so if it fits with the scene, and voila, you have yourself a artsy fartsy photograph. You know,
Emphasis on the fartsy.
emphasis on the fartsy by all means, but again, it's subjective, you know.
Yeah. Well, real quickly, these pictures, they all came from, I had a Canon S90. It was that real nice point and shoot camera they had. And I would be at a concert and I'd stay be in the 12th row and I tried to take a picture. And so I said, let me try night setting. And then I noticed what they were doing. And so then I started night setting and like grabbing the camera as I was taking the picture and moving it and jiggling
Yep.
a little bit. And yeah, a lot of throwaways, but there's some interesting ones in there. So what I really like to do now, I go back and look at them again, is on some of them I'd like to compare it to what you just did. Say, bring the bird's head into focus a little more than the rest of it to maybe give the people an idea of who this person is behind
Right.
this. You know, kind of like the. You know, in those movies where someone gets all morphed up and they're about to turn into something else and just the face is left,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I was dodging and burning the last time I tried this, so now I'm gonna go back at it with some of these other tools. And
Yeah. Awesome. Well, you got to understand that, you know, all these tools that I'm giving you, they're not, you know, I present them one at a time for easy digestion, but the goal is to utilize all these to move that image forward in your editing. Okay. That's why I kind of stress at the very beginning, identify the problems so that you know which tool to pull out of that toolbox in order to fix it. So, okay. The next part. Yep.
I'm going to watch this video again because I did something yesterday with a photo like this. I didn't go into that much, obviously that much. But can I show you a photo that I took yesterday that's based on the same type of thing with high key in the back?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah,
now let me do this.
since we're on the topic of high key.
It's on this topic. I don't have the original to show you how bad it was in the original. Let me do this. This was the final product. Do you see my picture?
Yep. Let me bring it up. There we go. Oh, you just posted this very
Yes, yeah,
recently.
and I
Yeah.
posted this on Facebook. This turned out, I said, hey, can you smile for the picture? And, again, when you're doing event photography, things happen. It's like, okay, I haven't set this up yet. Here I am taking the picture. And this, I did evaluative metering.
Mm-hmm.
I should have done it spot metering. Maybe it would have been better, but I don't find spot metering doing better than evaluative in this, where I have light in the back and dark in the front. So
Yeah, it depends on where you aim the spot meter.
okay, I usually try to aim this. I would have aimed the spot meter on the redhead in the front here.
Yeah, see, she's very close to that light.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
All right.
I should have
See,
probably-
I would have targeted this area here.
Oh, wait, I can't see what you're doing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so around their knees.
Okay, around the
Okay,
knees.
yeah.
All right.
All right, because that's the lighter area. All right. So in this particular image, we have three different types of light to contend with. We have a very intense background light that's coming in through those two openings, the window openings. Correct. Okay. That's going to very seriously influence your meter because it's coming in directly towards the camera. It's coming in through the lens. And because it's so intense, it's going to throw the meter off. All right. Again, I'm going to stress, Your camera is designed to lie to you all the time.
Yes.
It's just a matter of knowing, being able to anticipate the lies. Okay. So that's problem number one. That's light number one. Okay. The second one, and I definitely can identify this simply because I know the location. I know exactly where you guys are. All right. You have the ambient light from the sky that's illuminating the upper part of the wall.
Do you see
Okay.
my arrow?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. All right. So that upper part is going to be a lot brighter than the lower part around, the opposite corner and down around their knees.
This was
Okay.
horribly dark. They were horribly dark,
Yes.
and this was horribly dark.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Because if we were to really look at the the where the shadows lie on the histogram, and where the light is from those two little windows is, it's very, very, broad. I mean, the lights are almost clipped. As a matter of fact, there are probably areas that are clipped out. Okay. And the shadows, if you're not careful, can very easily be clipped out. I don't think that happened, simply because with digital we have better control over shadows than we do over the highlights. Okay. So the shadows are close but not quite clipping. Okay. But if we look at all the tonality here, all the tonality, well, what's going with your image here?
Oh, okay. I was trying to get up the original one. Never
Oh,
mind.
no,
Go
it's all
ahead.
right.
I'm okay now. Mhm.
If we look at all the tonality, if we were to build a histogram from this, you're going to notice that the majority of the pixels are literally at the 50% gray and darker. All right. I'm not able to see a histogram here, but I would put money on it that the majority of this histogram sits from the 50% to the dark. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
And I can imagine that the original, before even editing it, was grossly towards the dark side,
Oh,
with
yes.
that little spike in the light. Okay. So if you expose for something that the light that's coming through the windows, if you expose for something that's being lit by that light, it's still grossly underexposed. All right. So you really can't use that as your mean. All right. Simply because now we have to look at how the light meter works. It wants to take whatever it's metering, it wants to take it and turn it to what? Middle gray, that 50% gray. Okay. And if even with the light hitting it, because it's the light's coming in from the back of the head, even if the light is illuminating the subject and we can see the subject with our eyes, remember, our eyes can resolve shadows better than the camera. All right. So we aim, let's say, on that middle person's face. That face was still in the shadow part, but probably closer to midtones. All right. So now what it's wanting to do is it wants to make it 50% gray. Well, if the original tonality is let's say 40% gray, or even 40% gray, going from 40% to 50% is only 10%. It's not a big jump exposure wise. But if now we go down to the lower part of the image, where we're now looking at maybe a 10 or 15% gray.
Here, this.
Okay. No, in between the legs. Yeah,
Okay.
right there. Yep.
Mhm.
All right. So now we have a 15%. It wants to take that and turn it into 50%. So 15 to 50, that's a much wider jump. So now we're going to see a significant exposure jump of maybe about 2 stops. Okay. So now you have to, find your balance for the highlights and the shadows, all right? But you probably wouldn't have to work so hard at bringing the shadows up had you metered a little bit lower.
So I probably should have metered on her legs, you think? Right, her knees right here?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
you know,
Because her
if
this is lighter than her knees
cor-
are right here.
correct,
So
yeah.
you think maybe like that.
Not by much though. It's not by
Okay.
much.
Okay.
Okay. You can't let the color influence you. All right. So
Okay.
if you look at just the tonality of like the shade of gray on her thigh, all right, and then the shade of gray on the lady standing next to her on her thigh on the lit
Yes.
leg, all
Yeah.
right, they're almost the same, just a little bit brighter, but they're almost
Okay.
the same. Okay, almost the same.
Now, normally what I would have done with a picture like this is the sky I would have made darker, but I didn't in this case because I would like what you said with the bird. If I had made the sky darker, then these people wouldn't have stand out as
Right.
much as they did. Am I correct in my thinking?
Yeah, so this is a tricky one because you have to really balance um, you have to balance the overall exposure on literally 3 levels here. The subject level, the wall level, and then the sky level behind them in those little openings. Okay. So it becomes a little bit tricky where if you burn down that sky, they tend to look a little weird.
Yes.
All right, because now all of a sudden there's that uncanny valley. It's like, it just looks off compared to the light level that's hitting the wall, you know, and then whatever light you have on the people standing in front of that wall. All right, because we're assuming that the people standing in front of the wall are going to be lit by the same light that's lighting the wall. So
Okay.
we expect a certain cohesiveness and exposure there. So we can't really have an overly bright people against a much darker background, because now we're going to say, okay, well, how are they standing in the same light but yet they have 2 different exposures?
The other thing,
You know?
you sound like because Joe Whitmore has mentioned caution about faking the sky because the sun, throwing light in a certain direction. I can't remember what he
Yep.
meant, but it's probably what you're trying to say here, where something could look unnatural if you fake it too much. In this case, the reason why that sky is so bright is this is facing south.
Yeah.
I think everybody knows this is the Tower of Sleeping Giant.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And this is facing the south side. If you look out the window, you'll see downtown New Haven. This was at 11 o'clock in the morning, so the sun is backlit. You've got back.
Mm-hmm.
If we were outdoors, you'd have backlighting because of the sun in the.
Yeah, you
I
can.
think in the 10 o'clock position.
Yeah.
Of this picture.
You can actually see the direction of the sun. The guys furthest at the end, furthest back.
Yes. Yes.
No, the other one. The other one.
Oh, this one.
Right over
Okay.
his shoulder, you can see the light, the direction. You can see the cast shadow from the top of the arch, right over
Yes.
his shoulder.
Okay.
See that the light on the rock behind him.
Yeah, oh, I
Yep.
see, yeah.
See that shadow?
Okay, so if I
That
did
and
try to,
that
so if I did try to fake the sky, this lighting here would have given it away, right?
correct. All
Okay,
right. So we see we can see the direction of the light and we can see
yes.
the intensity of the light based on the shadow.
Hmm.
Okay.
Oh,
So
okay.
uh
Hmm.
in a situation like this, all right, and this goes for any sky that you want to manipulate. Okay. You can burn sky down to a certain level so that it still looks natural if there are clouds, all right, because the clouds are going to remain bright. If you keep the clouds bright, all right, so I don't know if you guys can see in the video all that well, but that window directly behind the lady in the blue shirt,
Hmm.
I can see very distinct cloud shapes in that little bit of sky. So if I burn down the sky, if I burn down the blue part of the sky, all right, but maintain a bright clouds, it'll still fit in. Okay. But
Here's a problem.
if you burn everything down, so now the instead of being white fluffy clouds, it looks like a light gray fluffy cloud, then
Okay.
we start getting into that unnatural valley, uncanny valley of the sky. Okay.
One problem I've had with burning the sky when there's ledges in the background where like you have your hill, then you have your sky, and I go, I don't like the sky. I make it darker. Then I end up with what do you call it? Halos between the
Yeah.
hills of the sky. We've
Yeah, but
discussed this before.
that's a masking issue that can be resolved.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, you could probably burn down that sky a little bit more and it'll still work.
Oh, good. Thanks.
So, but yeah, but you know what? It's even like this, it still works. All right, because we understand that they're standing in the shadow, and even though they're standing in the shadow, they're still lit because everything behind them is also lit. If that wall behind them was not lit
Mhm.
and the people were, then I have to start, oh, did you use flash? But how did you use flash if you only lit the people and not the wall behind them, you know? So, yeah, so this is edited very well.
I just thought of something. I want to show you the original. I will unshare and then bring up the original. One thing I would have been, I had to work fast, so it's like, yeah, Sky's good enough this time. You can see their faces. Um, if I had darkened the sky, would I have had a problem because you have her hair here and especially her hair here? Would I have ended up with a problem?
If you went too far, yes. Yeah.
Let me stop sharing for 1 second. I'm
Hmm.
going to call up the original and let's do this. Hold on. And I'm going to call up the original in Photoshop. Give me a second so you can see the histogram with Photoshop.
Yeah, and then we'll have to move on because I do want to get to that atmospheric editing.
Let me do this. And I'm not gonna, yeah, that's not gonna work. Never mind. They were very, you get the idea. They were
Yeah,
very
yeah,
dark. You get
yeah.
the idea.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Doc.
Yep, no problem. Anybody got any questions on what Bill presented? No, we're good? Okay. All right. Um, kind of touching a little bit on what we discussed with Bill and also touching on um, controlling controlling where the eye goes with exposure. In this particular case, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about atmospheric haze and utilizing it to our benefit. All right. Anybody who does any kind of landscape photography understands that atmospheric haze can be either a blessing or a curse. All right. There are times where, you have this magnificent view and it's ruined by haze that just kind of obliterates everything in the distance. And it just makes everything kind of look washed out, kind of like this. Right. And then there are other times where you want that atmospheric haze or, that foggy look, simply because it's gonna elevate the image into a from being something kind of boring to like, oh, now that's interesting. All right. And what makes it interesting is that atmosphere that is created in the image. Okay. So one of the tools that we have in Lightroom and obviously Adobe Camera Raw is a haze filter. We have the dehaze. Okay. And right there, right in our basic, the basic tab in the develop module, we have texture, clarity, and dehaze. And if we pump up the dehaze, what ends up happening is all those light tones, kind of washed out colors, gets brought back in. So what it's targeting, again, working from that middle gray to the light side, all right, the closer to the light side it goes, what it's doing is it's darkening it down. So it brings up whatever texture is there, it brings up, all right? And because when you lighten anything, all the color gets desaturated. What it also does is at the same time is it brings up the saturation in those very light pixels. Okay. So if I were to reset this, all right, so this is the default image. All right. We have all this atmospheric haze. And if you notice that the further back, the lighter it gets, until where it goes, from landscape to sky, there's literally no texture in that sky because everything's obliterated by that haze. But if we take that dehaze slider and we start bringing it up, all of a sudden we notice that we're starting to get all that information back. Okay. And I don't know if, let me zoom in. Okay. You could barely see those antennas, and as I bring this up, those antennas really come back into view. Okay. Now, obviously, this is very much oversaturated, and if we look at it, we're starting to really enhance some of the grain as well. So you have to be careful. Okay. But we can always control that just by, maybe reducing the saturation. Okay. All right. So that's an easy way to get rid of haze. But in this case, I don't necessarily want to get rid of the haze. I want to enhance the haze a little bit. Okay. So in this particular case, what I want to do is I want to increase that hazy effect. Now, if we take the dehaze slider and we move it the other way, well, yeah, we're adding haze, but we're adding haze globally. And now, all of a sudden we have what looks like this heavy fog right in front of us. Okay. But if you understand how fog really works, this kind of just kills the whole thing. All right. Because now we're hiding what we might want to have as being our main subject. Okay. So obviously this is a really terrible photo to be utilizing for this effect, but the reason I pulled it up is because this was the only one that I could find that has natural haze built into it, with a somewhat noticeable subject. Okay, so if we want, we could even, just, let's see, can we do it like this? All right, we'll do it like this. All right, so what I want to do is I want to maintain that tower as my subject. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to make that background just kind of disappear a little bit more into haze. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to build up that haze effect, but it needs to be locally controlled. All right, so one of the things we do is we're going to create a mask, local mask. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a linear gradient. Because if we look at the way this atmospheric haze goes, it kind of builds up the further back you get into your horizon. So the further away we are from the camera, the more haze. Simply because as we're looking out over a landscape, the further we are, the more atmosphere we have to peer through. So all this haze is building up and building up and building up and building up and building up as we get further away from the lens. Okay? That's why everything towards the front, when we're looking at a foggy night, we can see everything directly in front of us fairly easily, and then it immediately just kind of goes and disappears into fog. Okay, so we're going to accent the fog in this particular case. So I'm going to create a linear gradient. I'm going to start from the top and bring it down. All right, and I'm going to stop it randomly, not so random, at my subject point. Okay. And instead of using the dehaze and adding haze, all right, because that's just we can do it in this particular case. It might work, but oftentimes what happens is the dehaze slider tends to look a little fake. All right, so we want to really start controlling how we manipulate that haze effect. All right, so what is a haze effect? A haze effect is taking all our tonalities and shifting it into that 50% gray or 50% gray or lighter. Okay. So for this, what I'm going to do is instead of using the dehaze, I'm going to use the curve adjustment. Let me just close this one up. All right. And with the curve adjustment, we have our dark point. All right. And we have our, all right, actually that should be white point. All right. Black point and white point. Okay. And we have this line kind of going in between the two. And the reason being is this black point cannot go lower than full black, and our white point cannot go higher than full white. Okay, but we can take our black point and we can bring it up and make it lighter. Likewise, we can take our white point and we can bring it down and make it darker. Pretty obvious, right? All right, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to take all our dark tones, all right, and we're going to start making them lighter. Okay, because this is a linear adjustment. Okay, so let me see if I can explain this properly. All right. This is not a linear adjustment. Okay. Even though what we're seeing here is a line, a straight line between the black point and the white point, it's not a linear adjustment. Okay. A linear adjustment means if we take our blacks and raise it 10 points, it will take our whites and raise it 10 points. It'll take our midtones and raise it 10 points. So in essence, what that would look like if it were a linear adjustment, all right, and we have our blacks, let's say, start here, a linear adjustment would place everything that much up, okay? But as we already determined in a curves adjustment, we cannot go higher than this point, okay? We cannot go higher than pure white. It's just impossible. So what happens is as the blacks get brighter, everything diminishes in proportion. All right. So if we have, 10 points here, okay, we'll have 5 points here. Everybody get that? Yeah. Okay. So it's not linear. Everything doesn't move up all at the same time. Okay. There's a name for it. I'm skipping it. It's like it's a scale. Okay. Diminishing scale. All right. So if this is 10 points, let's say this is 8 points, this is 5 points, it'll be, 3 points and then 0. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all our darks in where the mask is, we're going to take all our darks and we're going to make them brighter. Okay. But everything that's already bright, it's going to stay put. All right. Or move up ever so slightly. All right. And how much we go, obviously it's going to be dependent on, salt and pepper to taste. Okay. So one of the things that I want to maintain is I want to maintain a certain amount of clarity around our subject. Okay. And what I want to do also is build this up in layers moving backwards. So if you ever seen like renderings of mountains in the background, you'll notice that mountains in the closer to you are a little bit darker, and then the mountains right behind them are a little bit brighter, and then the mountains behind them are even a little bit more brighter. Okay, we're going to build it up kind of in that step. All right, so here I'm probably just going to bring this down a little bit more, give that a little bit more of a haze, so that we're getting it right about here is where our haze is going to start. Okay. That'll give me plenty of room in the foreground to kind of play around with our main subject. Okay. So that's layer number 1. And I didn't add too much, just enough to start the effect in this area here. Okay, I'm not too concerned about this area back here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another linear gradient, bring it down from the top down. Okay, and I'm going to make it a little bit shorter, and I'm going to do the same thing. All right, and I'm going to bring that up. So now we're getting just a little bit more haze towards that back, okay? And if we want, we could even bring the top down because the haze is really just affecting the dark pixels, all right? That sky is already kind of blown out, so we don't really need to worry about it, you know? Okay. And then we can try one more linear gradient and maybe just that far back mountain, all right? And bring that up just enough, okay? All right, so if we look at everything before and after, okay? And then the rest is just working on our main subject here. All right, maybe at this point we're going to, let's try, this is where we can now start doing a little experimentation, all right? Let's try, reducing the dehaze just ever so slightly around it, okay? Bring up the texture a little bit and maybe increase the shadows, bring down the highlights, bring up the highlights, bring down the highlights. There we go. Okay. One more radial gradient. I'm going to just do it on that field there. And I'm going to burn down that field. Bring that down, bring that down. There we go. All right. Not the most phenomenal image, granted, but hopefully you get an understanding of how you can create that atmosphere. In this case, we're enhancing it, but you use the same technique to add atmosphere that's not there. Okay? So, any questions on how to do it? Okay, perfect. Okay. So what I have here is this image, okay? This is what it looks like before, and this is kind of what I did. Like I said, I went a little bit heavy-handed when I redo this, walking you through the steps. I'm not going to do it as heavy-handed, okay? So let me go ahead and reset this, okay? The first thing I did in this particular case is I changed my aspect ratio to 16:9 just to give it more of that excuse me, more of that cinematic aspect ratio. Okay, I'm going to bring down my whites a little bit just so we get a little bit of texture in that sky. Maybe even bring down the highlights a little bit. Okay, and now it's time to build it up. Now, previously I used linear gradients. In this case, I'm not going to use a linear gradient simply because we have the pump house as our main subject that I want to kind of maintain. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a smart mask. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and say select the background. Okay. And because this is such a really bizarre image where the tonalities are so close to each other, and the AI is going to have a hard time trying to identify what a subject is because it's not a typical, it's not a typical person or flower or car. All right. The AI is going to have a hard time. And as you can see, it thinks that just the pump house is what is not part of the background. All right. So in this case, it selected everything in the foreground as part of the background. Okay. So we have to do a little bit of editing here. All right. So what I want to do is I want to subtract. All right. So I'm going to go to the subtract button. I'm going to subtract from that mask. And in this case, I will use a linear gradient. And I'm going to subtract everything from that water line in the background down. Okay. All right. So I'm going to subtract everything from that water line down. Okay. And also, if we zoom, oops, let me get my navigator here. If we look here, it also selected a little bit, it encroached a little bit into the pump house. So what I want to do is I want to subtract with the brush. All right, I'm going to give myself a fairly tight feather. And I'm just going to erase the parts of the building that are encroaching on that background mask. Okay, so on this side of the pump house and on this side of the pump house, I'm just going to clean up my edge. Clean up that edge. All right, just so I have a much cleaner selection. All right. And I'm going to make a small, and I'm just going to go from here, click, click, and just clean that up. There we go. All right, so just like that, I have my background selected. All right. And now we can start applying our effect. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to go to the curves tool. All right, so we're still in our mask. And within the mask, we have all of our tools from our tone, including our mask. And we're going to pull from the blacks. We're going to bring that black point up. And as we bring it up, we notice that it's starting to brighten up. Okay. Let me turn that overlay off. All right, I'm going to come in and I'm just going to adjust that linear mask to kind of include the shadow that is hitting the top of that, the water. I don't want that to be dark and then everything else light. Okay, so hopefully you guys caught that. All right. So here's where we can, really start to figure out how do we want to apply this effect. Okay. And in this particular case, we're looking at our background at a bit of an angle. All right. So if we look at this, let me get out of the mask here. Okay. This section of our background has a couple of layers to it. All right. This upper part way here is further in the back than this clump of trees. All right. And this little bit of coastline. Okay. So that coastline is closer to our eyes than the hillside right behind it. So now we have to figure out how do we want to build this atmospheric effect. Okay. Likewise, this section of the shoreline is closer to our eyes than this section of the shoreline. So in essence, this should be a little bit brighter, a little lighter than the area closer to us. Okay. Now, how technical do you want to get? That depends on how much work you're willing to put into your image. All right. You can look at this the way it is and say, you know what? That works because I've created enough separation between the pump house and the background to satisfy my needs. All right. So again, one of those salt and pepper to taste, how much work you're willing to put into it. Okay. we can leave it as is, or we can, keep going. All right. The thing with this, oh, you know what? I just noticed my horizon's a little crooked. Let me go here and straighten this out. That's bugging me. There we go. Sorry. Okay. So that, for me, I can live with the way I tone down those background trees. Okay. I've pushed them enough into that haze to really satisfy my needs. Okay. However, what's bothering me now is that the whole entire image is kind of flat. All right. It was a nasty day. We saw it with the previous image that, I added that sunset glow. We have a very flat light, which can be a benefit because now we can add certain effects that we want that aren't there. And because it's a flat image, we don't have to undo certain things in order to redo it. All right. So for example, we have no heavy contrast in our lighting. So we don't need to remove light from one spot in order to add light to where we want it. All right. Simply because everything is just flat light. Hope that made sense. All right. So what we're going to do in essence is we have all this flat light that we can manipulate by adding contrast, by adding shadows. Okay. So the first thing is obviously all this foreground is just kind of pulling the eye in and out of the frame. So I'm going to go ahead and add another mask. Okay, so I'll relabel this background. Okay, I'm gonna add another linear gradient, and this one I'm gonna add it in a diagonal that kind of covers that road. Right, it selects all that road. Okay, and what I want to do is I want it to be a gradient that goes from the corner. So what I want to do is I want to darken the corner and kind of just fade it off as we get closer to the pump house. All right. And for that, well, you know what? Since we're using curves, let's stay with curves. Okay. So what do I want to do? I want to take the pixels and I want to darken them. Okay. And again, what's black cannot go blacker. All right. However, our midtones being right in the middle, we can manipulate that either brighter or darker. Okay. And the bright tones obviously cannot go brighter, but we can make them darker. Okay. So that's what we're going to do is we're going to take that white point and we're going to start dragging it down. Okay. And we're just going to let's make that a little bit more of an angle. Okay. Let's turn off the overlay. All right. And now how dark do I want to make this? Okay. And this is where we now have to start using our noodle, because like the previous example that we discussed with Bill, where, if we have our background overly bright, what stands forward? The dark areas. Okay. So now here we have something that we would normally burn down in order to diminish the visual impact. But because the rest of our image is so bright, what stands out? That far corner. Okay. So we have to weigh it carefully. Okay. So now we have to use our noodle. All right. If I darken that down, all right, to diminish to diminish the prominence of it. Okay. What else do I need to do to kind of balance that far corner? Well, I'm going to have to darken something else down. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to darken the pump house. All right. Because what I want to do is I want to create a little bit more contrast separation between the pump house and that background that we just lightened. Make sense? Okay. Now remember, because all of what we're doing is non-destructive, we can always come back to a particular edit and fine tune it. So I darkened it quite a bit. It looks off because now our eye are going to that far corner. All right. But I'm going to leave it there for now. I can revisit it later. Okay. All right. So I'm going to, all right. So let me rename that. We're going to call that road. Okay. I'm going to create another mask. This time I want to target the pump house. All right. I want to make some corrections to the lighting on the pump house. All right. So we know that when I selected the background, the AI selection for the background, it had a hard time figuring out what was background. It selected everything from the pump house. So that tells me that if I then say, okay, select subject, it will do everything that, everything except, okay? Or we can use the previous trick that we did previously where we took an already built mask, we duplicate it and invert it. We can do that as well. Okay, so either way it's going to work. All right. However, I know that because I had to do a little bit of cleanup in order to fix my background mask, if I do an AI selection of my subject, I'm also going to have to do some cleanup. Okay, so to avoid that, I'm just going to go ahead and say, all right, my background mask, I'm going to duplicate and invert. Make sense? Duplicate and invert. Okay, and I'm going to rename that pump house. Pump. Okay. All right, and because I duplicated it and inverted it, all right, you're going to notice that everything that was done for that previous mask is been reset to 0. So I'm basically, I have the mask only and no edits to it. So now I can go ahead. Okay. Now, what do I want to do with the pump house? Well, right now it's very flat. So how can we fix something that looks flat? Anybody want to venture a guess? How do we fix flat lighting? This is a tough one. I'm going to challenge you guys. How do you fix flat lighting? Yeah. Go ahead, Alan. I know your brain is ticking.
Flat lighting, I mean, since you're using a curve,
Well,
would it,
forget about what tool we use.
okay,
All right.
all right.
Okay. If we were to do something to manipulate our environment, how do we fix flat lighting?
Saturation, yeah.
Nope, that's color. That's color.
Oh, your color, yeah, color. Right.
Think light.
What was that?
Think in terms of light.
Oh, think in terms of
Yep.
light.
Okay. So what's the opposite of flat?
Well, then your bar that goes either white or black. The bar that goes back and forth in color.
No, no. Yeah,
top one.
don't think color. Don't think
Oh.
color. Okay. All right. So here, let's start with like a blank canvas. Okay. We have a subject in front of us, and we know that when we photograph it, it's going to be a flat two-dimensional subject. Okay? Because that's what we're looking at a flat plane of our screen. Okay? If we want to give the viewers some information that what we are looking at is actually a three-dimensional subject, we need to inform them in one way, shape, form, or another. Okay? And typically, that's through how we light the subject. So if we're taking a photo of a person, all right, how do we let the viewer know that that is a rounded three-dimensional object?
Well, you make the pump house darker.
The what?
The pump house. The pump house itself.
Yep. What parts of the pump house darker?
The brick, the gray brick in the roof.
Okay. Let's simplify it even more. All right. There are no bricks. There are no shingles. There's no door. It's just a shape. It's a cylindrical shape. Okay. How do we tell the viewer that that's a cylinder?
That would be.
All right. I told you this is a challenge. Okay. All right. If I were to draw this, all right, I'm the illustrator. I'm drawing this. Okay, and I have a cylinder. Okay, and I want to show you that it's a cylinder. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to, what do you think? What am I going to do? Anybody?
Well,
What am I doing to my drawing?
oh, you're brightening or darkening the edges.
I'm adding shadow. Yes.
Shadow.
All right. The shadow gives us a clue to the shape, to the form. Okay? So therefore, if we photograph something that's totally flat, how do we change that from a flat object to something that has shape and form? We have to add shadow. Awesome. We got there. Okay?
The hard way.
The hard way. All right. But I know I put you guys on the spot, but now I'm trying to have you change the way you think in terms of editing. All right?
I knew that with portrait photography, and I just couldn't think that it goes with landscaping too.
It goes with everything you photograph.
Okay.
Everything. All right. And, all right. Yeah. All right. I've simplified it with this particular image. All right. But let's say you have a photograph with multiple subjects. Okay. You have to attack each and every one of those multiple things on their own level in a more microscopic controlled way. All right. So if there was a car here, I would need to manipulate the light on the car. If there was a person there, I would need to manipulate the person. Okay. So in this particular case, it's fairly simple. All right. I've already manipulated the effect on the road by adding shadow to the road, giving a little bit more of dimension. Okay. Although you guys probably weren't thinking in terms of creating dimension to the road, but that's exactly what we did. We gave it near, far, near, far. All right. So if we look at it in terms of landscape, all right, when we look at a landscape, here, let me close this down, okay? If we look at this one, what do these tones tell us? Right? Near and far. Why? Because I've manipulated the way we see the light, and we understand that in landscape, the further we go, the kind of more light and muted things get. Right? So that informs the viewer of what they are looking at. They're looking at something that is on a perspective plane, that as they're looking into the frame, that frame is receding into the distance, even though physically, if we were to turn our screen sideways, this is a flat image. There is no distance. There's no background and foreground. Everything is on that one plane. So we have to trick the eye into understanding what we're looking at. All right. So yeah, I did put you guys on the hook there, but hopefully you're now kind of seeing things a little different way. Okay. So now I have my pump house. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that linear gradient in the foreground, all right, because I don't want that. I just want the pump house, okay? All right, so now what I need to do is I need to make it look rounded. So that means I have to manipulate the shadows and highlights on this, okay? I'm not going to touch the highlights because the highlights are by default already there, okay? Because we already have a high key image to start. So what I want to do is I want to add the shadows. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to add, I'm not going to subtract, I'm actually going to do what's called an intersect. What I'm going to do is I'm going to intersect one mask with another mask. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to intersect a brush with what's already here, which is the selection of the pump house, okay? And the way we can do that is if we press and hold the Alt key, all right, what I want you to do is just look at this here in my, I have the pump house selected, okay? And right now you see the add and the subtract. Okay, but come off it. As soon as I press the Alt key, you notice that that button now changes to an intersect. Okay, so I'm going to click on intersect. In this case, I want to use a brush, so I'm going to create a brush, and I'm going to be fairly large. I don't know if you can see my brush, fairly large, with a very soft edge, because what I want is that edge transition to come in very heavy at the edge of the pump house and kind of feather in, okay? So I'm going to just kind of paint a little bit, all right? And if you notice, what happened was the initial mask disappeared because now I'm doing an intersect. And as I paint in, a new mask is appearing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fade it a little bit on the top to kind of give it that conical feel, all right? And a little bit heavier on the side, all right? So right there, just with painting the mask, you can kind of see that it has a little bit of a roundness to it, all right? But what we're going to do, just like we did, we're going to stick with the curves just so you get an understanding to it. And we're going to bring the edges down, okay? And in this particular case, it's taking it's applying the effect more on the outside edges. Let's see, can I do it with the draw? All right. It's taking a very heavy application of that effect on the edges, and because I used a feathering brush, it's going to feather in and become less towards the center, okay? So what happens is we maintain our initial exposure, all right? This exposure hasn't changed, and what we're doing is we're darkening our edges, okay? So in essence, what we're doing is we are adding dimension, okay? So before, after, before, after. Everybody see that? All right. Can you see that it looks more rounded now? Okay.
Yes.
Also, because we've added darkness, and we had previously added darkness down in that lower corner, we now getting this little bit of a of the interplay between the pump house and the road. Okay, so we're now balancing it. Okay. All right, that's looking a little bit better. All right, now again, it's probably a little heavy on the background. All right, you can always go back to that background image and say, okay, I don't want to be that bright. Maybe I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. Okay, remember, all we're doing is creating contrast between the foreground subject and our background. All right. So previously we had very neutral midtones. So by making our background lighter, we created that contrast difference. But now what I did is I made the foreground darker. Oops, wrong way. Darker, which further increased that contrast. So now you got to say to yourself, okay, does that contrast look normal, natural, or do I need to fix it? All right. So in this case, I think, fixing it a little bit will, oops, grabbed the wrong one. Fixing it will bring it a little bit more to, visually interesting. Okay. So hopefully you understand that particular concept. All right. That's all we're doing is we're just manipulating our tones. Okay. Now we can do additional light and shadow. All right. But I don't want to go too crazy with this particular edit. It's already starting to get late. All right. But now what I want to do is I want to create a little bit of visual interest. Okay. This was taken just as the sun was starting to set. And even though we had a huge softbox of a sky that flattened out all our color, right? The actual light in the environment was already starting to darken and the street lights were starting to come on, right? And if we look at the light, let me see if I can zoom in here. All right. If we look at the light over the door, the light came on. Okay. But because I kind of overexposed the image, it's not as obvious. All right. So let's work on creating a little bit of interest there. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back and I'm going to create a radial gradient. I'm going to place it over that light. All right, I'm going to keep it round by pressing and holding the shift key. Oops, there we go. All right, and I'm going to just minimize the center so it's just over our light, maybe even a little bit below it. Okay, and what do we want to do? We want to make things brighter. Okay, we can't make the light brighter than it already is. White is white, but we can take everything around it that is being illuminated and making it a little bit brighter. Okay. We can also add color to our light, all right, because here we have the ability to manipulate individual color channels. All right, so I'm getting away from the more simplified edit. This could have been done with the exposure slider, and then you could manipulate the color with the color temperature, right? But I want to show you that you can also do the same thing with the curves adjustment. So what I want to do is I want to warm up the light. Okay, so what do I need to do? I need to add yellow. But if we look at our colors here, yellow is not one of the selections. Okay, but what is the opposite of yellow? Anybody?
Green.
Nope. Okay. All right, so how can, all right,
There we are. Blue.
okay, blue. All right, so here's a way to remember, all right? So if you have RGB, okay, RGB, the opposite is CMY, okay? So the opposite of R is C, cyan. The opposite of G is M, and the opposite of blue is Y, okay? So let me get rid of that. Let me get rid of that. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go into our blue channel, okay? And right here, you can see that just within this representation, we have blue in the upper left corner and kind of like yellow orangey into the lower right corner. So that right there lets you know that, you know, what we're going to do is we're just going to pull it down into that yellow tone. Okay. And at this point, salt and pepper to taste. Okay. All right. And one of the things we have is we have that door. So maybe in the door, I just want to bring up the red a little bit. Oh no, that's not going to look good. Just a couple little points. Okay. All right. So just with the red channel and the blue channel, we're able to really warm that up. Okay. So how does that look? Let's zoom out. All right. Let's get rid of the mask. Okay. All right. That's before. That's after. Okay. And if we want to create maybe a little bit more contrast, we can take another radial gradient. I'm going to make this kind of like tall and skinny, and I'm going to put it like right there. All right. And in this case, let's see, we'll go back to our curve. We're going to go to our, make sure you're back in the RGB, which is that white one. And we're just going to take our midtones and we're going to pull them up just a little bit. Just a couple points. Okay. Everybody see that? Go from there to there, there to there. Just adds that little bit of a highlight and we're good to go. All right. And we go from a flat, boring image to something that has a little bit more oomph to it. We can definitely tell what the main subject is. Okay. And of course, if you want to, you can manipulate the sky a little bit more. If you even want to get crazy, you know, select sky. Okay. We're going to bring our sky down. Oh, no, actually, you know what? Let's intersect it with a linear gradient. All right. And we're going to bring that down and then bring, oh, grab the wrong one. Come on. There we go. Just a little bit, just a little bit. Not too much. Okay, now we're good. Excuse me. All right. So that's the finished product. Any questions?
Nope.
All right. Obviously, you know, we can play around with it a little bit more. I would probably that area all the way. Will it allow me to? Yeah, all this here. I'd probably, you know, balance it out a little bit more so that these trees don't stick out as far, and all that good stuff.
Well,
But
it's like like you said, is that how much time you want to put into it.
right,
Yeah.
right,
Because yes, you could do a lot more to it.
yeah,
The background, clarity, a little color or whatever you want to do.
yep,
Yeah, but you're right. That's just the best fan is so. Pump house jumps at you.
yes. So yes, absolutely. So before, you know, it's very bland. Um, we can make it out because if we look at it, we have the contrast of the roof against the sky because the roof is darker than the sky, and we kind of have a contrast of the building against the background because the building is lighter than that background. Okay, but that's a lot of flipping back and forth. Okay, so by really toning down the tree line, all right, we now make the whole entire pump house dark against light instead of dark on light at the top and light on dark on the bottom, and having to do this flip-flopping back. So, okay. Any questions on this edit?
No, it was enlightening though. It was, I could see where, you're making me think different ways when I'm doing an edit now. Looking at it completely different. And it's great. Just the best way of looking at it. There's not this. I need to spend more time on it. I need to do.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, just, you know, again, but if we really break down everything that I did here, it came down to those three things: manipulating light, manipulating color, and manipulating texture. All right. We really didn't do too much with the texture, you know, which we can really, you know, soften up that background. You know, I can always go, and that's the nice thing. Once you have a mask, all right, I can take that background mask now and say, okay, I'm going to, not tone, I'm going to go to my effects, and I'm going to bring, you know, the texture and clarity down. Okay, so that texture doesn't pop forward as much. Okay, and we can do the same thing with the pump house. I can even add. There is no one mask for the pump house, even though I have a mask called pump house. You notice that it's only the edges of the pump house. Okay, so if I want, I would just build a nice radial gradient, keep it just to, you know, that part, and increase the texture and clarity, all right, of that. And now that really now stands forward. So before, after.
That is nice. It looks as if the place is being lit
Mm-hmm.
in the front.
Well, it
And-
was.
and-
It was.
but
But
you really couldn't see
you
it.
couldn't see it, right? Right, because again, the light was so flat. Everything just kind of melds into each other. You know, there was no real definition. So, all right, guys, thank you once again for hanging out with me.
Thank
I
you,
hope
Doc.
you found this inspirational and educational. And let me actually do a print screen so I have this. Okay, awesome.
As
Are-
usual. Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Good
All
night.
right. So
Good night.
have a good one, everybody. We will see you next week with Photoshop.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.